to talk to our spammers who ask if you want to become famous and if you want to buy followers and viewers, and the answer is no, thank you very much. Actually, we don't even need to become famous. Of course, we need to grow the audience for this show as well, but it's not about being famous, it's about serving the people, just as Charlie does, who is on the show with us tonight, and will be back on the show in a few seconds, I hope. If you have questions in the meantime, I would be glad to take them already. Charlie, I can hear you, I think. Yes. And I can also see you. So we're back.
We're back.
Thank you very much.
Good.
Did you sweat?
Great.
Did you sweat a little bit? Think that was it?
I wasn't sure. But
okay.
Look, when you're calling from so far away, there's always a chance that gremlins will come into the system.
You know, that's the fun thing about technology. It's the same if you would be around the corner than it is if you sit in Dublin and I sit in Zurich, Switzerland.
Yes.
Good. Charlie.
Yes.
I think I've lost a thought there because of the interruption. But
where did we get to?
Where are we getting to?
Yeah, I think I'm not sure what you heard last, but I was saying that that there's a connection between the service or the product.
Absolutely. So my question would be, of course, in theory, it's totally clear how this works. You have people who understand you have people out there and they hear what people need. And then you build that thing, you find financing for that, done deal. But in my experience, it's not that simple to actually have the people who already work for you being out there and not just do their job, but also want to do more, also be interested and curious in learning more, and then telling it to you or to other people on the team. And in the end, that might even mean more work for them.
Yes. But what we have inbuilt, and that's why I would go back to our values as an organization, because one of those values is ambition and is enterprising. So every member of staff has those two values, as well as the others that I mentioned, at the front of their mind and at the heart of their being. So when they're with a service user, they may have a thought about how they could develop that service or how it could be improved, or why don't we do X, Y, or Z? And then that thought is captured and it can be the result. And I hope you heard the example of the drug addictions service. So one of my staff came to me and said, can we have a meeting about going to people as opposed to expecting drug users to come to us? So, that was their thought, which turned into a service which we got funding for, which then became government funded. So, I think you've got to have those as your value base, that you're not just, and when you're dealing with people who are vulnerable, maybe it's easier, I don't know, but it says something about the staff that I have on my team. And the constant, I always talk to my staff about values. I'm a very simple person. I'm not a complicated person. And I don't believe that any business model should be complicated. I think that it's a leader's job, and me as CEO, to make the world seem simple, even though we know it's complicated. So for my staff team, I constantly talk about our values. I constantly reinforce them. And I try to lead those values as well. Look, I'm human as well, but I try to lead those through my own example. But I encourage staff on a daily basis and through weekly communications, through monthly vlogs, through visits to teams, to say, well, what about this? Or why don't you? Or have you any thoughts about? And it's that enterprising commitment to enterprising and that ambition that staff have to change people's lives. I mean, you couldn't be in a better business.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about helping other people to change their lives, and the reward that my staff team get from seeing a drug user overcome their drug addiction, from seeing a prisoner being able to pick up the pieces of his or her life and do something meaningful with their life, is huge and really inspires them to think of new ideas. And we set up a fund as well, I should say, within the organization. So within the board, we actually monetized the enterprising value in saying, look, if you have a seed project, if you have an idea that could be seed funded, you apply through our business development committee of the board for your idea to be considered, and we'll give you £50,000 to start it off. But the trick is to make it sustainable. Is at the end of that for you to have an idea that can be taken forward and integrated into our business model, and it's worked incredibly well.
Cool. Charlie, I think it's almost time to wrap it up. Before
okay.
we do, we have 2 questions from
Sure.
Christoph Hess. Thank you, Christoph. What are the benchmarks for you in terms of online fundraising?
Ooh, that's a good question. In terms of online fundraising, well, you might have heard that.
You need to know that Christoph is a digital marketer.
Yeah.
So maybe that gives you context. I'm not sure,
Yeah.
Christoph, but I hope this is the right framing for Charlie.
Yeah, so for us, so we're primarily government funded, but at the moment we have a coronavirus hardship appeal, which is on our website, and we've attracted £60,000 into that hardship appeal through donations and gifts. So that's been
nothing,
largely
Charlie. That's
digital.
Nothing. You just got yourself a new deal for £14 million.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
60,000.
No. So we don't do a lot of it, is my point. But you know that the coronavirus hardship appeal did get us that amount of money. I mean, but more importantly, as I was saying earlier, the comms, marketing, and sales aspect of our business is about relationships with commissioners. So we invented the bail supervision scheme. It was Extern that invented it, and it's now been expanded with money from government to roll it out into different counties across Ireland. So we proved the model that it works. And then we got additional funding from government. We convinced them. So the answer to that question is we don't get a huge amount of money through digital donations, but a bit.
Good.
Every little helps.
Christoph helps us out here. He says, I asked because in Switzerland fundraising is still very old school with letters, like that's posted letters, that are sent home, very little online and very few creative ideas.
I would agree with him. I think it is, and our business would prove his point that actually the big money is with big funders. So go for the big fish rather than. I mean, it's not that we don't spend a lot of resources in getting small money. We do spend our resources in going for the big fish, like the 14 million fish that we talked about.
So let's talk about the 14 million fish, because we didn't before. I just brought it up because I needed to kind of contrast the £60,000 that you just mentioned. So a few weeks ago, you sent me that message saying we just got, and I think it was at the beginning of the lockdown actually, you said we just got ourselves a £14 million deal, a new deal. And let's go back to the revenue numbers that we have mentioned in the beginning. So you came from 6 million 6 years ago to 27 million at the moment, which means that the new 14 million will, I mean, I don't know in what time frame you will actually work for that money, but that means that it's another explosion right now, another growth explosion.
Yeah, it is a growth now. It's over 5 years, but it still adds to our business 3 million a year, which is huge.
It's 10%,
and I think
it's still more than 10% growth.
It absolutely, and it proves the point that if you have a good idea that changes people's lives, which is what our business is about changing lives. If you've got a good idea and you try it, and quite often this is the case, be prepared to pilot something radical. Be prepared to try some innovation.
So let's
if it works,
tell us a little bit what was radical about the thing that actually got you that new deal for 14 million.
Okay, well, if you think about society's attitude to young people who get drunk and who knife somebody or who creates violence or mayhem on the streets of Dublin, society's usual answer is they need to be locked up. They need to be put away. They need to be put into youth detention centre. Our answer is, hold on a minute. The clever and smart thing to ask the question is, what has caused that young person to behave in that way? Because if you send them to prison, not only will you not solve the problem of whatever it was that was causing them to act out in that way, you will add the trauma of being incarcerated and anger that young person will have against society when they come out of prison. So is it not better to pilot a scheme, which is what we did 4 years ago, to convince government that your money is better spent in solving, being brave and being able to ask the question, why, continually ask the question, why? Don't accept the world the way it is. Don't accept that young people offend. Ask why they offend, and then you get to the answer.
So what are you going to do with the 3 million every year?
So what our teams will do is provide an intensive social care model. Those are just words. What does that actually mean? So it means that a program, an intensive program for the young person who would have gone to prison, is agreed between the judge and extern about what that young person's needs are. So it's a holistic model. It's called a multisystemic therapy model. So it looks at the reasons. Our specialist staff who are trained in multisystemic therapy look at the root causes for what has caused the young person to offend, and also looks at what I call the ecosystem around them. So it may be a peer, another young person that's causing them because they're part of a club or a gang. Or it may be that a parent has caused this young person to be angry, or it could be something else. So we look at the whole environment and we set out a detailed program working with the young person and the people around them to help identify what the problem is and plan their way through it. And then they go back to the judge, and if it's worked, and we have a 90% success rate of it working, then they don't go to prison.
Okay. Sounds good. So basically, you saw the problem that there was. You had somebody paying you for what you already did, but you told them you would have a better service on offer. You convinced these people, influenced those people, or convinced them. They were convinced themselves. Maybe they just needed to hear about it. And they said, that's actually a good thing. Where do we find the money for that? They found it. And they told you, yes, we can do that deal. And now you're doing better work. And of course, you need to also deliver on the numbers. As you just mentioned them, like 90% of the people have a better result at the end. And so as long as you can prove that, that works out fine. And that's how you achieve that bit of growth.
Yes, exactly. And it's been relentless in terms of looking under every stone for answers, because the people that we deal with deserve answers, because it is about our values being, we believe everybody deserves a second chance. We believe there's nobody in society that cannot be turned away from their problems, their mental health problems, the trauma that they've had, their drug addiction problems, their gambling addiction problems, their homelessness. We're there as an organization to help people realize that they themselves can be enabled to change their lives. It's not us that does the changing. We enable people to change their own lives.
We're coming to our final round in a second. Christoph, there was this other question of yours. You said, what do you think about platforms like, and then you put 3 asterisks. And I'm not sure whether that should be a name or what it means. Could you please tell me what that meant, what the asterisks stand for? That would be great, so that we could give you or get you your answer before we wrap it up here. So back to the people. You had to convince people. It took you 6 to 9 months. At some point you had them. I didn't even ask about those who left extern, because I'm pretty sure some also left. And then you started growing from there, added more people, and in these cases 430 new people, net at least. That of course meant that they already had to buy into these values at the moment.
Yes.
That must probably have been easier to do, right?
Well, it's still important. So when we employ new staff, we at the very start have an induction program which our staff deliver, and I endeavour to see every new staff member personally and to talk about. You've heard it before, but I keep going back to it: values, because I know that if I can get staff to buy into those values and to see the ambition that they have for the people that they're there to serve, then the rest comes. So I'm a very simple person, as I've said.
We have to cut that short, unfortunately, Charlie. I would like to summarize the other 2 aspects. You also mentioned product. And what I will take with me from this conversation is that innovation should happen at, like, where people actually work with the client or the user, I mean, those people know best. They are your ears out there. They hear things that you could never hear yourself in your office, or even if you would be traveling all the time, which sometimes you do and sometimes you can't.
Yeah.
And the other thing, the third element, sales as we called it, and you kind of told us it's about communication, marketing, and sales, and sometimes you can't tell one from the other. That, in your case, has like two client segments, basically. One is the people who bring in the money, one is the people who need to be served. And I think what I take with me after this conversation is that it never stops. You always influence people. You have your purpose, you know what you're doing it for, and then you talk with people all the time, and this never stops. I think this is what we can learn from you, Charlie. The hour is up. Thank you very much for being on the show today. And
it's been my pleasure.
To seeing you again.
It's my pleasure. Goodbye to all your viewers and listeners. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share the success of Extern across Ireland and hopefully the world eventually.
Bye, Charlie.
Bye-bye. Thank you.